Hey rail fans and model railroaders, welcome to the first episode in our track laying series on getting back on track with Steve. We really appreciate how you guys have hung out and waited for us to restart, and we're really excited to start this next series on our layout. So our layout currently is planned out to run on DC. However, in the future, I think we're going to probably want to change over to DCC, so I've been planning my wiring to accommodate that. So during the time that we've been away, I've been thinking about the track plan I have, and I think we need to do some changes to that track planning to take advantage of some of the advantages that DCC has to offer. So we need to figure out how can we incorporate these two separate lines so that we can put them together to run DCC. However, we still want to be able to add a switch so we can separate them and run DC for a while. But with that, it's also going to take some changes to our elevations. So why don't you take a look here? We're going to show you what the changes to the track plan are. Going back to our previous track plan in the SCARM software, we were easily able to revise our layout. Standing at the end of the peninsula, looking towards our buildings, we added a turnout switch on the right and the left-hand side. This will give us an additional track that travels straight and up onto the upper level. Following that track to the right, we have created a series of turnouts that will allow us to transfer a train between the inner and outer tracks on the upper elevation. Then continuing down the track, we'll install a double-track bridge across the river. Then once across, there will be an additional turnout on the outer loop that will eventually lead to our future rail yard expansion behind the backdrop. We created similar turnouts between the tracks on the opposite side of the layout. The switches between the tracks can be isolated for DC operations. Then when we convert to DCC, we can use a double pole, double throw switch to change between the control systems. So now that we've decided on some changes for the track plan, next we need to make sure that we got the elevations. And the reason that we have changes is currently the peninsula is about 2.5 inches lower surface than the upper elevation on the layout. And if we have just a regular 2% incline, it's not enough incline to be able to make it all the way down to the elevation and back up if we want to track from the peninsula to the upper. So we're going to add another piece of foam 2 inches up. So now we're going to have a difference of only 1/2 inch between the peninsula and the upper. And that way we can go ahead and do a 2% rise right onto the peninsula when we can still have our lower track coming into the peninsula and hitting a switch and being able to run it. And this way, you'll be able to switch trains between all of the lines that we're going to currently build. So with that being said, let's get the elevation changes in, and let's start laying down some of the track plan and transfer it onto our baseboard. Let's get this work done. Start this up, and this is what we're using. The glue we're using is Loctite foam board adhesive. So the first thing to get done is the 2-inch foam install on the peninsula. So working with Roxanne, it's a little easier to apply the beads of adhesive and spread it around fairly evenly. We won't need a lot of glue on here to hold this in place. It should hold just fine with just a minimum amount. Once we put it in place, we want to position it to make sure we got it nice and even around the edges. Then when we're happy with the position, let's add some weight to it so that we can keep it from moving during expansion of the adhesive. And we're pink again. The next area we need to adjust is the lower track coming off the peninsula. And here we're going to build up the elevation level with the peninsula, going halfway through our curve. We then have some decline risers that we'll use to complete the downhill run. So using a piece of 1/8 Luan panel as a base and a template, plus 3 pieces of foam board, we come up level with the peninsula and 1/2 inch below the upper level elevation. So we'll need to cut a total of 6 foam board pieces to cover both the left and right hand sides, and 2 Luan pieces. Once all the pieces is cut, we want to dry fit them to make sure they fit correctly. And then once we're sure that the pieces fit as planned, the next step would be to apply adhesive to each layer, then adding weights. So as we put our pieces down, we'll just continue the process, adding foam, add glue, spread it out, add foam, until we have a total of 3 pieces in place. Then we want to add our weights to mitigate our adhesion expansion. And here's hoping that these come out just right on the elevation as we measured. I think that looks pretty good, so we'll add our weights and then move over to the right side. And here we just continue with the same process, gluing the Luan panel and then spreading it around. And I wanted to add a bit more glue on these because I may end up having to cut a little bit on these in size to make it work with the downhill risers, the decline sets. Once again, it's layer by layer, glue, foam, glue, and our last piece of foam. And this side should fit just right as well. And of course, we'll finish gluing these in place to the lower elevation after we transfer all of the track plan on and we're sure that it's working correctly and we don't have to adjust. Next, we start the transfer by marking the center and scoring the foam with a trammel. So we want to make sure that we stay 2 inches off from the edge here. And then once we are satisfied with our curve, we can go ahead and score the lines and mark it with our Sharpie. And here we're going to continue the line down the side. We're going to score the foam, take our measurements, decide where we want our turnout to be, and we're going to score all around it. Measure to ensure that we're correct off the center line of the turnout. And then once we're satisfied that, we can go ahead and mark it out again with a Sharpie and then connect our track. So next we want to determine the location for the inside line running up to the upper elevation. And this we can mark all the way to the elevation and then mark it with the Sharpie. But then we want to create the transition from the turnout onto the actual line. Here I use a rod, a piece of styrene, to be able to create the transition curve. Once I'm satisfied with the transition, I'll go ahead and move it along, score this position, and then mark it with a Sharpie. Now we move on to the curve, and we're going to mark it off and again score it using the travel. Once we get our line scored, we can mark it with a Sharpie again. And once again, we want to use our rod to create a transition into the curve. Now here I note the line seems to be getting a little close to the edge, and I may have to adjust this curve a little bit further to get a little more spacing. But we'll try it for here for now. Well, there you go, rail fans. We managed to get our elevations fixed by adding some foam to the peninsula, and we raised up part of the cores going off into the lower elevation. And I've got some incline sets that I'll be able to continue on down to the lower from there. We've also transferred half of the track plan onto the peninsula, and I didn't bore you with the second side of it because it's a carbon copy. It's just the mirror image. But you get the idea of how I'm going about doing this, right, wrong. I think it'll work just fine, but time will tell. As we lay track, we'll definitely be testing as we go to make sure we're not making total mistakes and wasting material. But I think it's a good start, and I think we're moving forward nicely. So until next time, make sure to hit like, subscribe, and leave us a comment. If you got better ideas for laying track, we sure want to hear it. Hit the bell and make sure you get notified when our next videos come out. In the meantime, have a good time on your layouts, enjoy rail fanning, and we'll see you next time on Getting Back on Track with Steve.